Joining us tonight.
Delighted to be here, Liz.
So it's a little bit of a not so happy occasion because it looks like your party is poised to return to the minority where you toiled for many years.
Right.
What is your initial feeling about that?
Well, there still is an appeal, but we'll assume that that will be separate and apart. I'm very disappointed. We had the opportunity to do lots of good things in the majority of the last 2 years, and we've done many of them through legislation, but they've been clouded by a lot of the dysfunction.
Do you think, who's at fault for most of that? I mean, what could have been done better? Should you have changed leadership, perhaps?
I think there's a number of factors. Overriding is always the economy, so people don't like the people in office.
Right.
But then secondarily, was the Montserrat and Espada situation, which I think began the downfall. And right before that, there were the Four Amigos 2 years ago. And then there was the ability of one senator, because it was only one seat majority, to hold up legislation. And I thought it became very, very difficult for us to govern.
Okay, so the appropriate thing you have advocated in the past for is to have returned to the minority with a clean conscience, if you will, not to have accepted Hiram Montserrat and Pedro Espada back into your conference. Now Hiram Montserrat and Pedro Espada are gone from your conference, and yet you've lost the majority anyway. Right. So there seems to be something else that must be missing there.
Isn't hindsight wonderful? No,
it is fantastic. Yes.
I think people remembered, and I think they voted, and they voted. There was a Republican tsunami in New York State. There were lots of...
But not really, because the statewide races all went to the Democrats.
The statewide did. The local, I think the tsunami kind of related to the New York, maybe in particular, the New York State Senate. And I think we had a lot to overcome. And we didn't mention the AEG report right before the elections.
See, that's a good thing. You bring it up, so that's a good place to start. I mean, AEG, it was scathing on the leadership of the Senate. That's John Sampson. That is Malcolm Smith. That is Eric Adams. That is Antoine Thompson, not a leadership member, but now he is gone. He was defeated by a Republican in one of the most Democratic districts in the state.
I believe there's close to 90,000 more Democrats in that district.
Right. So what should have happened? Should John Sampson have stepped aside at that moment?
I don't think so. The Fish report came out at a very bad time. There are allegations in there that are very difficult, but they're yet to be proven. And I think that there's investigations going on now, and hopefully the chips will fall where they may. I don't think a resignation by anyone would have helped after that report was issued.
Joseph Fish is a Democrat. Did you not think to yourself, did you not scratch your head and think, this is strange, the timing of this report?
I did think that this timing was strange, but I don't think of anyone as a Democrat or Republican. If they're put in as an investigator, they should do a proper job. But there's been, it seems to me, way too many different kinds of investigatory agencies. I would prefer to have one independent agency over both the New York State Assembly and the New York State Legislature.
Okay, so now it looks like you're going back to the minority. I understand the appeal. First, do you believe that that appeal should continue?
I can't question the appeal. I don't know any of the underlying law, election law. It's not a skill I have. I'll defer to Senator Johnson and his staff. Business should proceed as usual. Hopefully we can begin at the first of the year and not have the appeal interfere in any way. Okay,
but at the moment you would technically be deadlocked without that seat decided.
So whether we're down 32-30 or deadlocked, it's going to be a very difficult next 2 years for Democrats.
The majority, the Democrats I should say, are $2.4 million in debt. Are you personally on the hook for that?
I don't believe I am. I haven't been asked to sign for it.
You haven't? Okay.
No.
In the past, was it the practice for the Democrats to sign for debt like that?
I have signed in the past, yes.
You have?
Yes,
okay.
I have.
So who is then responsible for that debt?
I think that probably the signing is the perfunctory. I assume that the New York State Senate Democrats are responsible for it. We'll do everything we can to satisfy that debt, begin to raise money for the election 2 years from now.
Okay, if you are in fact 2.4 million in debt, which you are because it's in the filing, and how is it responsible then to continue fighting a race in the Long Island that most people believe is essentially over?
Most people, but I really, around that area, I thought Tim Bishop had lost at one point in time. I have to, again, defer to them out there. I would agree with you. It looks like that we have lost that race, but let the courts decide. But don't let it interfere with governing. We got to make sure that Governor-elect Cuomo comes in and begins and is not upset by any court proceedings, And Judge Lippman has indicated that he will do everything he can to expedite any court proceedings so that the first of the year we'll be ready to proceed.
Last week there was a vote in your conference. It was held, it took many people by surprise actually. It was essentially a vote of confidence for John Sampson to continue being the leader for the next 2 years. You voted yes.
Yes, I did.
Why?
Well, because I think John Sampson's a very decent, honest, good person. I think he's led the conference for the most part well. I think we need some new people around him. But I didn't see any other person who was competing against John Sampson. I think he's been a good leader.
Well, how could there be any competition, to play devil's advocate? How could there be competition if there's a surprise vote called off the floor that nobody knows about?
I talked to John Sampson about the process. The process was bad. I said to him, you didn't need to have it be done that way because there was no one else.
And what did he say to you?
He agreed.
He agreed? Because
Yeah.
there was only one member of your conference who actually abstained, and it was Dave Valesky.
Right.
So why would you not abstain if you didn't believe that the process actually was worthy?
I think everyone, I think only the new senators should have been allowed to vote, and the old ones should be allowed to be there to participate.
The old ones, you mean those who had lost their seats?
Like
not
a
those who had
Senator
been
Foley or
reelected like yourself, I
Sikowski,
see.
to be part of the process but not the vote. And to give a notice. As a lawyer, I always expect when every time I vote on anything, I'll be given notice. That wasn't done. I think it was an error, and I think David Valesky voted against the process, not against John Sampson. I think there was universal support for John.
So really, you feel confident that going forward in the minority, John Sampson is the man to lead the conference forward? What makes you feel that way?
I think John and I came in the same year. We've served together 14 years. He's a very well-known lawyer on the board of Albany Law. I think he's a very hardworking, honest person. I think he'll do a good job.
But what is it about his leadership skill, if in fact the last 2 years have been dysfunctional? What about his next 2 years are going to be any better?
I would suggest to you, Liz, if anybody could have controlled Senator Espada and Senator Montserrat, and some occasions Senator Diaz, be my guest. There were some senators that were exceedingly difficult because of their personalities as well as their actions. I believe I came on here 2 years ago and told the state of New York what I thought about Pedro Espada, and a short time later about Senator Montserrat. People elected Senator Montserrat and Espada. That wasn't John Sampson who elected him. He had to play with the cards that he was dealt, and some of the members of my conference, and that's one of the reasons I suggested that we should be in the minority from 2 years ago, November, till now. And I think if we had followed my suggestion, we would now have 35 or 36 seats. But that's hindsight.
But also, just again, people had also have returned Senator Ruben Diaz, who you also suggested perhaps should no longer be in the conference because he was problematic. And they've also returned Senator Carl Kruger, who was in cahoots with the original Amigos. So how are you going to go forward and work with these people?
Well, we have 2 of the 4. I think you continue to work with them and hopefully go in a direction of making positive legislation for the state of New York. I'm not saying it's easy. I have a difficult time in conference because there are people I don't want to sit next to.
I have to ask you this last question, which I think is probably a little uncomfortable. Right before you were reelected, there was a question about a drunk driving incident.
Right.
You were pulled over.
Pulled over.
Right. And you were let go. Nothing happened.
Right.
Correct. Why were you so reluctant to talk about it initially?
I think because I try to hold myself above the general population, and just the fact that I was stopped bothered me, and I was embarrassed by it.
And there were no, you didn't call upon anyone to assist you in that? It was a totally above-board experience?
I called no one. Went through the process, was let go, and drove home.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much for coming in to talk to us.
Thank you,
I
Liz.
appreciate it.
Yeah. Have a great evening.
You too.